So this will be the second part of our middle childhood lectures, the forgotten years. So I'm going to talk about last week I did physical and cognitive. This week I'm going to do social and emotional, and then I'll finish up with some more information about the precede, proceed. So this is your 8th week. You'll also be taking the midterm this week. There'll be no discussion post though. There will be a weekly reflection though. So this week you only need to take that midterm, which is 25 questions. And then you're also going to write a weekly reflection. Then you will go on spring break. When we come back, though, I had been thinking originally that we would talk about middle childhood again, but I think I'm going to wrap that up, and then we're going to just talk about special issues that kind of affect children at this age: attachment, child abuse, adverse childhood experiences, language development, and bilingual education. That's an interest of mine. Special education, things like that. So that's kind of how the rest of this course will go. And then, of course, at the end of each lecture, I'll talk more about precede, proceed, because the goal is that at the end of this class, you have a real understanding of the precede part of the precede, proceed model. We've been working through various parts of it. I kind of wanted to give you a macro level view. So as a whole, how is it being used around the world? What does it look like? What is it used for? And now we're going to get into a little bit more of the details and the factors and things like that. So today we'll talk about the developing child. Erik Erikson's stage theory, will continue with that. Talking about the child, the family, and the community, which also has to play within the child, their peers, and bullying, and that's why I wanted to make this its own kind of lecture. That's an issue that I get asked a lot. It's a hot topic, very current event issue. And then we'll finish up with some precede, proceed model. So introduction, this is the forgotten years that I've talked about. A lot more time, interest, and research money is spent on adolescents and then infant and toddlers, specifically those first 3 and 5 years when we know a lot of brain development is changing. But children are also maturing really socially at this point, but they still need support from adults because they're developing that social and emotional ability. So it's an interesting age in that they are branching out more, they're clicking more, they're making friendships and strong friendships, but they also need more support from their caregivers in order to make quality friendships that don't veer into kind of aggression or bullying. So our emotional growth, this is interesting in that they now have the ability to understand that people have perspective and emotion. So I was talking last week about kind of that cognitive task of the child being in front of a mountainscape that we have created, and there's a doll sitting on the other side. So now they could tell us what the doll sees. They could understand that that the doll's perspective is a little bit different of this mountainscape versus what I might see. So we know that this is the beginning of their ability to become less egocentric. They now know that people have emotions, perspectives, frameworks of their own that they are coming out of. And this helps them develop their own self-concept, that I am a separate person than the people around me. I'm a separate person than my family and my peers. Who am I? Part of understanding who I am is that I'm going to exist within a society and within a community that has specific social rules and social conventions. It's kind of that pragmatic part of speech. So how do we use the social part of speech? It also has to go with how do I use the social rules and social conventions? When do I say please? I say please, especially with my grandma when I want taffy or something at her house, but I'm not going to say please as much maybe with my peers on the playground or playing tag or something like that. When do I use social conventions? When don't I use social conventions? But really what we want at this age is more of that regulation of their emotions, a balanced self-concept between what I need to work on and what is the strength of mine, what's my vulnerability, what's my strength, and to be pro-social. So not anti-social or struggle with social, but allowing them to express a variety of emotions, helping them understand empathy, that other people feel things, and that we don't want to hurt their feelings, teaching them to act appropriately in a variety of social situations and deal constructively with life issues. Once again, this is not something that all adults are wonderful at 100% of the time. We're asking a lot of children at this age. We need to be understanding with the fact that this is a process. This is something that we are teaching them through their interactions with their teachers at school, because this age is now in formal education and an elementary school level of some type, and then also modeling with their parents. So seeing how their parents use social conventions, see rules, how do they treat waiters and waitresses, how do they act with their own friends at a barbecue, how do they interact with their family at Easter. All of those types of things they are learning and absorbing from the people and the peers and the adults around them. So we know that it's a lot of Erik Erikson's industry versus inferiority. That's 6 to 12. So we have the stage theory from Piaget, which is cognitive. But once we get over into Erik Erikson's stage theory, which is social and emotional, we're really looking at industry versus inferiority, which does a little bit play into what we learned about Piaget, that you have this impulse to learn new things, and if you can't do it, then you are going to feel guilt or shame or something like that. So you are trying to read, you're trying to write, you're trying to ride a bike, you're trying to learn how to swim, adult skills, things that are going to serve you the rest of your life. So you are learning these things quite young that you will then use for the rest of your lifespan. So we want that motivation. We want them to learn. We want them to catch the bug that reading is amazing and it takes me places, or science allows me to learn about the natural world, or math helps me set up systems to help things as well. There's a lot to learn, and we want them to have that motivation, that love, and that lust for learning. So we want them to be productive. If you aren't encouraged, or you're told not to be motivated, or you're not given proper motivation, or you're just not allowed to do things that are real adult skills, they're going to have a conflict, and they are going to feel like they don't have that motivation. They don't have intrinsic motivation. They don't have what's from within. It might be extrinsic. It might be, you have homework due, you need to do it, you need to do it, you need to do it. But we want that intrinsic motivation. We want what's inside, so that they can use that throughout their lifespan, so that they want to learn. You probably, as college students, are dealing with both kinds of motivation. So you have this intrinsic motivation. You've picked a major, it might be human development, you want to be a physical therapist, you want to be a teacher, you want to be a social worker, so you know, and you're working really, really hard towards these things. You're staying up late, because I see when you're turning in your weekly assignments at midnight on a Saturday or something like that. So you guys are working really hard. Most of you are holding jobs as well. That's intrinsic motivation. That's coming from within you to go and to achieve this goal that you have for yourself. But you also have extrinsic motivation. You would probably not be writing about child development each week if I didn't put a grade level on it. You probably wouldn't post in the discussion boards if I didn't rate it. So there are both of those types of things, and I have an intrinsic and extrinsic as well. I have the things that I want to do at work, but I need to also base it by my time and what I get paid for, and that's my extrinsic motivation. It's hard to do some goals if I don't have childcare or I don't have money in order to do it. I have to prioritize what I can based on the intrinsic motivation that I have. So children are being exposed to this, and we want to get them motivated so that they are lifelong learners. So we need to let them develop that motivation by giving them adult skills, teaching them how to read, how to write, to ride a bike, to swim, to jump, to bead, to cut, all of those, art, create art, learn about science, take them to museums. A lot of this stuff now has to be within the community so that we can teach them what's around them so that they can engage with it. So part of that is the family. So we are still a vital influence. We are an influence throughout the lifespan, but a lot of times this forgotten age, they don't need us to wipe their butts, wipe their nose, put them to bed, that type of stuff, but they still need something from us. They need us to read a book to them, oversee their homework, quiz them on spelling words. When they're having a bad day with friends, coach them through it. Talk to them about gossip, talk to them about fights on the playground, how to play sports, sit on the soccer field and cheer for them. Those are the types of ways that we help children start to navigate the shift into more of the broader world. When infants and toddlers and early childhood preschool age, they are with us the majority of the time, or they're with a caregiver quite one-on-one at most times. Now this age is going out more in the world. They're playing on teams. They're learning about other people. They're going to school. They're not with us all the time. So we need to help them regulate themselves, and we need to help coach them throughout their days so that they are kind of successful members of society. So we need to explain to them why behaviors are unacceptable or why they are acceptable, and help them process actions and consequences. I had a conversation last week with one of my daughters about what gossip is. Because she was really interested to tell me about something naughty that one of her little friends in kindergarten had done. And so I said, did she hurt you? Did she hurt your feelings? Did she hurt you physically? She said, no. And I said, well, then you're not concerned about that. Talking about this little girl to your twin sister, to your friends, or to me is considered gossip. And I don't really want to hear about that. I'm concerned if she hurts you or she's your friend. I want to hear about those types of things. But I don't want you to just report that she had a bad day, because that's none of your business. That's her business, the teacher's business, and her parents. And we're not going to have those types of conversations. Because she was basically mystified at the whole idea of gossip. It was not something that we had talked about before. She's probably, unfortunately, seen me gossip about celebrities or acquaintances or something like that. So she didn't have an idea that socially it's frowned upon to gossip about people. So it's something that I have to help her regulate. I have to help her understand about the social and emotional consequences, and then also to know social and emotional development, and also about what the consequences are. If you continue to gossip, people might not want to be friends with you as much. So then the child and the community, child and the family as well. This is a period where families might start to fragment. Once again, there's a huge variety of family structures, and it doesn't really matter what the structure is as long as it's a loving, responsive to the child care giving group. So it can be, a single parent, a single dad, a single mom, two moms, two dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, huge amounts of family. It doesn't really matter as long as the people that are taking care of the children are responsive to the child's needs and they meet those kinds of needs. Now it's less food, poop, poopy diapers, that type of stuff. It's more that social and emotional consequences and actions, helping them get to sports, things like that. But this is a time when divorced, separated, or co-parenting parents might be a little bit hurtful on the type of family. So when families split up, there's moving, there's changing schools, and divorcing parents can have an effect on the child, but it really can be mitigated if the parents support and are responsive and get support services as needed. So all of those things, the financial instability, the moving, the changing schools, those types of things that will affect children in the forgotten years. So having to move schools especially, or having a change in their financial stability, will affect the stress level of a child. But if a parent continues to have a strong bond with their parent, they continue to see each other, they continue to support the child, go to their events, and get support services as needed, either financially or counseling to kind of handle these situations, then those kind of negative associations that we have can be mitigated. That effect can be mitigated on the child. And then single parent households as well. We're looking for a close bond. And that's very typical among single parent households. The unfortunate thing is that economically, you are typically disadvantaged coming from a single parent household. There's only one person that's supporting you financially, and so that can be a financial hit. And then another issue can be the loss of contact with one of the parents. So one single person is supporting an entire household, not only financially, which can be difficult, but that also can lead to having to support a family and support somebody else's development, your child's development socially and emotionally, and all those types of areas can lead to a lot of family stress and insecurity. So we really need to make sure that as a society, we're supporting and we're uplifting the single parents in our community through social services if they warrant that because of their financial instability, or just helping them make sure that there are less moves. There's quality childcare both before school and after school so that the single parent can go ahead and work. There's therapy and counseling as needed for the family as a whole, to work together as a whole and start to negotiate some of these things together. And then if the child needs it, and then if the parent needs it as well. If the parent is struggling with a divorce, struggling with co-parenting, struggling with the stress of dealing with a family all by yourself, then you might need therapy. And there's lots of sliding scale fee therapy out there for families so that they can continue to kind of support children. Then there's the child in the community as well. So a big thing with this, along with the single parent thing, is just poverty and economic stress. As of last year, 18% of children across the United States live in poverty. And having a lower socioeconomic status can lead to increased stress. It can affect your family as a whole if you're a single parent, or if parents are having to leave, or in high school, one of my friends' fathers needed to take a job as a truck driver. So he was with his grandma most of the time. His dad was gone for 6 to 8 weeks at a time, driving all over the United States, providing for his family in that way. But that affected his family life in that dad was gone a lot and he was with the older generation. Then school performance as well. You know, if poverty, you know, my daughter's school has a uniform. What's a dress code, really? So being able to afford those types of things, PTO fees, field trip fees, and that's part of why I joined my PTO to be the treasurer. Is I am looking to increase scholarships for families. So if your family can't afford field trips, I mean, I was getting like quarters and nickels and things like that. The families were scrimping to provide these type of things. I want to make more money so that we can provide scholarships, so that we're not another source of stress financially for some of these families. So that is how poverty and economic stress can affect children. And we'll talk more when we come back from spring break, really in depth about how community issues affect children. And that's why the pre-seed proceed framework is so important, is it looks at these types of factors and it looks at policy and regulations so we can make meaningful changes for children. But lack of food, money, housing, medical care all can lead to parental stress as well. And that can negatively affect children, especially the access to medical care, which we talked a lot about with infants and toddlers. Once again, food insecurity, and I was just looking at this because I know that food insecurity is a real issue for the younger children. And once again, the forgotten years, we're much more in tune with children 0 to 5, 0 to 3, and we know that it's really detrimental to children's health. So I actually just kind of looked this up for this lecture. So there are associations between mild household food insecurity. So most days, you know where your food is coming from, but right before that paycheck hits, or when you're sick for a week and you don't have the full paycheck that you're expecting, then you have some food insecurity and you're not having the full nutrition that you're supposed to or that you can provide to your children. That is harmful mostly in early childhood, but it continues to have significant associations with health up into middle childhood as well. So children this age are still growing. The growth curve has tapered off. We're not growing as much, but your ability to take part in sports and to be able to think and be able to learn in the classroom is affected by the type of nutrition and if you have enough calories. So it's still an issue for our middle childhood. So what we're really targeting is social support and then educational programs that can combat stress and status and food insecurity. Once again, with our family, the child is in school, and I'm going to talk more about after school because I don't have a lot of effect on Common Core. As the PTO treasurer, I'm working on field trips and scholarships and fifth grade camps and things like that. But if you want to look at school policy from an educational standpoint, as far as like the Department of Education, stuff like that, that is a whole other class. That's a whole other wheelhouse. I'm going to talk more about the things that I know, which is after school, and things after school would be much more affected by the pre-seed proceed movement framework as well, or research models. Because school is so large and because it's a publicly funded thing, doing research in those situations can be really difficult. But going to your YMCA, your Boys and Girls Club, or smaller programs like that run or operate at a school district or at another site, you can affect research much more differently. At after-school programs, I have taken part in research study from UCSD as a clinician. So we are seeing that you can have those partnerships and you can make policy changes much more effectively with the pre-seed proceed movement and after-school experiences and situations. And a lot of children are using them. So 71% of the children in the United States, their mothers work. It depends on the hours. So that's 28 million children in the United States as of 2015 who have both parents or a single parent who works. That's a significant amount of the workforce, especially when you have children who are now in elementary school. If you were home before, this is your time to maybe possibly re-enter into the workforce, or you've been working this whole time and you continue to, you have a little bit less of the burden in that your child is in school. But, you know, my daughter's school gets out at 2:50. Most of the time I have a family member pick up, or I can pick up, but some days I need to have somebody go and pick them up. An unfortunate thing is that 15 million children go home alone. And in the model childhood stage, I really believe, and this is a perspective of mine, is that 6 to 12, 6 to 11 still needs to have adult supervision after school, or an older sibling who is a late teenager or early adult. So some of you might be babysitting or nannying or have younger siblings and cousins that you are responsible for, because this is still an age that I believe really needs after school care. So we're looking at public schools having programs, child care centers, corporate programs like Discovery Isle now pick up children or take them to school. Then there's independent after school programs, the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, faith-based programs, a lot of churches offer programs after school as well. And then FCC, which is family child care. So a small daycare where the woman goes and picks up a couple of people after school, formally or informally under the table, hey, will you do this for me? So there's a lot of different ways that children are getting after school care, and it is important that they still have that supervision after school. And this would be a way, if we were going to use pre-seed, proceed for the forgotten years, for middle childhood, we would probably do it in an after school setting. I do want to talk about peer groupings, though. It's social and emotional development at this age is characterized by wanting to engage in peer groupings and develop strong bonds with a few select friends. And this is from a textbook that I use over at Palomar, but really what it is it's typical to form clubs and cliques with a few friends. And this is a very normal, very important part of our social and emotional development at this age. We're moving away from our parents. Who I am is influenced a lot by my parents, but it's also influenced by my friends and the people around me. So I'm shifting a little bit away from my family and more into my peers. What are my peers teaching me about life? What are my peers teaching me about friendship? So we need to have what we call balanced adult supervision. So we need to allow them to have clubs. We need to allow them to have close friendships. We also need to have enough adult supervision if it becomes aggressive or bullying, that adult can come in and they can stop those types of behaviors. So when I'm talking about, I love clubs. So I used to run after school programs. I like clubs because you can, if you're into drawing or reading or science or animals, you can make clubs about those types of things. And then children are grouped by their interests and not by their gender or their ethnicity or the language that they speak. They're united by a common love of something, and I really, really like that because I think that makes really strong friendships, and it also broadens your society group. So you're not just with the people that you've always been with, you're with a boy or a girl or a friend or something like that. So that's why I really like clubs and making close friendships based on interest versus based on some kind of arbitrary thing like gender, sex, religion, language, ethnicity, those types of things. I do want to talk about bullying. So we want cliquing. We want close friendships and close groups. But when it becomes aggression, that's when we need to kind of stop it. And that's when we need that balanced adult supervision where they can stop and say, no, this is not going to happen. And we're going to have conversations with the parents. Or they can stop it before it becomes really damaging emotionally to the child. What we would say, and this is from a textbook, it's a management textbook that I also have at Palomar, it is bullying is unprovoked aggression intended to inflict injury or discomfort on the victim and can be either direct or indirect. Once again, boys are often more direct. It's aggressive, hitting, punching, pushing over, and then physically girls are more direct. They socially isolate and they gossip. And social isolate is, oh, don't play with her, she's gross, we don't like her. So that's typically how genders engage in aggressive behavior, and it's less instrumental. So before, with our preschool age and our early childhood, it was instrumental. You have my toy, I'm gonna whack you on the head and I'm gonna take it. This is not. This is about social changes, how we change cliques and clubs by engaging in aggressive behavior with other people. Instead of Starbucks, I didn't even realize I needed to get some work done. I was out and about and I had like 2 hours free. Sat down at a Starbucks and then it's like 2:30 and there's 900,000 middle schoolers all around me. And I saw this firsthand. They got out, they came to Starbucks, they were buying their Frappuccinos or whatever it is, and they were pushing each other over, and they did that classic thing where one person goes behind a person and then the other person falls behind them, and then the girls were talking smack about other people, and I just like totally saw that unsupervised, like in a Starbucks, after getting out of school where you have not had a lot of opportunities to be socially and emotionally intrigued, without good supervision can lead to some aggressive bullying behaviors. So another issue with this is kind of the cyberbullying, and I am struggling with this because I don't even understand a lot of the social media. I was on Snapchat once, I didn't understand what it was. My friend's Chihuahua was on. I don't get it. I clicked out of it and I took it off. I'm not on Instagram anymore. I'm not on Facebook. I have no social media profiles, and I'm very happy with that. But I see how this is an issue. It's changing rapidly. Apps are changing. Algorithms on social media are changing. And so it's very, very easy for children who are in this age period, who are still learning how to handle peers, to create friendships, and are dealing with aggression, can be very damaging online, especially if children this age are given unrestricted access to screens. So they have social media accounts that are unrestricted by their parents or unobserved by their parents. I can see how they could bully people or other people could bully them. And I can also see how this can lead to suicides or pedophilia or things like that. So it's a real genuine issue. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later in the class as well. It does more get into adolescence, and that adolescence is in a different age group. That'll be in year 303. It's less in 302. But I think the idea of parents being involved and very much restricting and being aware of what their children are doing on screens or online is really important at this age in order to teach children how to use screens. So how do you use websites? What's a good website? What's fake news? What's Instagram? How does Instagram work? Are you going to be able to go on 900 times a day? You know, at this age, 6 to 8 hours that they could be on a screen. And that's a significant amount of time. And it's very easy as a parent, and I've seen this myself, is to give somebody a screen, not know what they're watching while you're making dinner. And I think that that's something as a society that we're going to need to make more rules about. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those things because Harvard is kind of leading the way with making ideas about screen time and how to keep children safe. So supporting socialization, though, how can we keep people friend focused? I like that idea. So you get friends, you get to have clubs, you have to have cliques, but we're not encouraging you to bully. We want you to focus on cooperating, negotiating, talking, resolving, playing board games, playing foosball, running outside, kicking a ball, having a newspaper club. All of those types of things are hopefully, when you're supervised, going to cut down on the bullying. I do want to talk about disaster events in children as well, because a couple weeks ago we had the Parkland shooting, and we know more about this age, actually, funnily enough, and how children are affected by disasters. So this comes straight from the CDC, so the Center for Disease Controls. It's a fantastic part of their website. If you go to emergency at CDC, if you just Google that, it will give you information for each age group and how they kind of handle disasters or like events, current events, big things like shootings happening near them or around them or even to them, unfortunately, if they were a survivor of Sandy Hook or Parkland or something like that. So older children, so 7 to 10-year-olds know about loss and will feel sad, mad, or afraid that the event will happen again. They often share false information that they've overheard from parents or caregivers and will need to correct that. So they've heard things from the news or from other people, and we need to make sure that it's the correct information because it's very easy at this age to overhear things telephone-wise and then pass on wrong information. They typically focus on the details of the event and they want to talk it over and talk it over and talk it over. They're processing it through kind of talk therapy. And this disrupts their concentration and it also affects how well they do in class. So for some preteens, so tweens and stuff like that, they will engage in risky behavior. So the older age of middle childhood, 10, 11, 12, reckless driving, alcohol, or drug use. Hopefully our 11 and 12-year-olds aren't driving, but they can access alcohol and drug use, and it can begin as early as 9 or 10 years old. Some of them may be afraid to leave home. They cut back on how much they want to hang out with their friends, feel overwhelmed, and they have intense emotions. So we know that children are really affected by current events and things that are going around on them, even in this forgotten middle childhood age. If something happens, so in the fires, if you are finding that families around you or children around you that you impact or that you work with or that are part of your family are struggling, go to emergencycdc.gov. They have fantastic information, and they give you tips and ways that you can work with children. But we know that it really depends on how directly they were exposed, what kind of loss they had. So somebody who was at Parkland during the shooting is going to be affected more than somebody who was at a neighboring high school when it happened. And then your experience of trauma though as well. So if you had been, I think that it was probably difficult in Florida. We had a rough winter with all of those hurricanes and thinking that hurricanes were going to come, and then this Parkland thing happened. So that might contribute to some extra stress as well, as that they had kind of a rough year generally in Florida. So just generally to wrap up this social and emotional part, we're moving away from our families and we're learning more about our peers. So children need to give the opportunity to kind of work and learn adult skills, reading, writing, swimming, things like that. Otherwise, they will lack that motivation that they need to be successful throughout their lifespan. And we need to support peer groupings, clubs, cliques, close bonds, and friendships with peers through stable and balanced adult supervision in order to keep children safe from aggression. So last week I covered, with the precede-proceed model, I covered epidemiology. We watched a video on it and I talked a little bit about it. I gave you the case study from England. We talked about kind of its genesis within the world, things that we might look at. We also looked at factors, so the part of the precede-proceed, preceding, reinforcing, enabling factors, and then we looked a little bit at reliability and validity again, but I will come back to that. That's a difficult concept. If you haven't got it yet, don't worry, we have the rest of the class 8 more weeks in order to understand more of these, and we'll circle back to that. I'm trying to give you some basics, so when you're reading these things, these precede, proceed papers and things as we go forward, you have more information and it helps you. So we're gonna do kind of the bookends now. We did the middle, we're gonna do 1 and 5 phases, and what I like about this is this really works on the idea of it being participatory. So any research model and any community health intervention is really only as successful as if the participants are actually participating in it. They have influence over it, they want to do it. You know, you can be told how disgusting smoking is and how bad it is for your health, but if you don't actually want to quit, nobody's going to be able to do that. And it's kind of the same way with health promotion. And then we're also going to look at it, we like it through the context of community. That's why 1 and 5 are also really helpful, is you're looking through the community and you're looking at health behaviors as being something that you choose, and that's something that you need to participate in. So phase 5 is that administrative and policy diagnosis. So I'm going back to that first study that we did that I showed you guys in the first week, which is about Samoa, because I think this has a really good breakdown of what policy, organizations, and educational strategies are. But examples would be health education, policy, regulation, organization, and personnel. So educational strategies in Samoa, this was the ability for people to leave in evacuation routes. And then it also deals with like mobility and obesity as well. So educational strategies would be lifestyle, nutrition, education, community gardening, evacuation trails, and fitness trails. So people learning how to evacuate by also running and being fit on those trails. And then changing policies, regulations, and organizations, like organizational management, personnel management. How do you set up policies? How do you set up organizations? How do you change policy to better meet the needs of your community? through better evacuation routes, which would involve local government, community garden plans as well, finding vacant lots, having the community government or the local government around you give you approval to make a garden on that plot. Village safety zones as well. You might not need as much policy. You're not maybe changing policy, but you will need to do organization and regulation, and then village meetings as well. So that's an example, and I like it from Simone because it really breaks it down into how is the policy, how are the regulatory bodies, how is the organization of these social services supporting making better routes for people to evacuate if need be, and then educational strategies that might need some policy or regulation or personnel in order to make those changes. It also has to do with the ergonomic study that we did where cashiers are standing for long parts of the day. A lot of you brought up that if the management doesn't buy into it and the management doesn't make changes, either wide, like Walmart making changes and it trickles down to your cashier, or in a smaller store, just the management buying into this idea that it's a stress on your body to stand and repetitively move things and pick things up all day. To have a better workforce, you need to change your policy. And a lot of you guys picked up on that, so thank you. So administrative with our phase 5 would be resources, circumstances, organizational systems, anything that helps or hinders a health promotion program from a larger standpoint. So the administration of how a social services program is run. And then policy. What we're really looking at policy is the policy and the outcome. So that first phase, the goal of the program, is the policy and the goal compatible. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have to change the policy, sometimes you have to change the law in order to make something that's compatible with your goal. So vaccinations, I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with having a law to make everybody do it. I'm still on the fence with that one, but it was a way that we changed policy and we changed administration and we changed state government in order to be more compatible with our goal of having most of our population vaccinated at a young age. So also with the ergonomic one with the cashiers, the outcome is ergonomics and better safety for our workers. What if the policy of the store is cost saving? Are those compatible? Are they not compatible? We would have to use this framework to look at it. Then phase 1, once again, is our social diagnosis, looking at our outcome, our quality of life. But really what it is, the part of it is, what does the community need or want to improve the quality of their life? So this is from a master's in public health who's also an Army colonel, and he has this great image, which is, in social diagnosis, we ask the community what it wants and needs to improve its quality of life. What outcome does the community find most important? Eliminating or reducing a particular problem, like homelessness, improving or maintaining certain aspects of the quality of life, environmental protection, or improving the quality of life in general. So getting rid of something like homelessness, improving something like environmental protection, or looking at quality of life like a recreational opportunity, like giving children scholarships so that they can enter into swim classes so that they actually have the ability to swim and to have that introduction to swimming safety. So how do you do that though? How do you find out what a community needs or wants to improve their quality of life? Community surveys, focus groups, phone interviews, face-to-face interviews, and questionnaires in public places. Depending on the reliability and validity that you want with the study, you might engage in some or all of these. So surveys and questionnaires are typically the most structured, and you're going to get more reliable data typically, but focus groups, phone interviews, and face-to-face interviews are a little bit more subjective, but you also might have more things brought up that normally might not jump out to you, especially if it's a specific community. Like a friend of mine who used to work at Cal State worked with migrant populations, so people that weren't necessarily speaking Spanish who were coming here as migrant workers, and by having groups and interviews with that population, things that they weren't aware of in the brush where they weren't living, the chaparral and stuff like that, they were having issues brought up to them that they weren't really aware of, like with drying clothes, with health and safety, things like that, because they didn't live and they didn't speak those languages. Through these groups and interviews and having things translated, new things popped up to them that maybe on a survey and a questionnaire wouldn't. So there is a lot of importance to all of these ways that you can do it. And so it really depends on your outcome and how you kind of are going to set up your research that you would do this. You guys probably aren't ready to do research yet. I'm just exposing you to the ideas of ways that we can do research and the strengths and vulnerabilities of some of these methods. That is it for this week. We've gone all over middle childhood. It's your midterm week, so after this you're taking your midterm and then you're having a wonderful week off. And then I will catch up with you guys again. So have a fantastic week and I'll see you when you return.